Hey, everybody. So here we are, week 4. I wanted to give you a quick update and tell you a little story. um, really, I just want to kind of get at the root of all this stuff because I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking the last 4 weeks now, but I still get the sense that a lot of people don't quite understand what it is that I'm doing or why I'm doing it. But before we go there, let me just say thank you to everyone that has sent me notes of encouragement, or if you've let me know that the information that I'm sharing has helped you in some way. Thank you so much, because that's the stuff that keeps me going when I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. It's those little notes that, hey, my aunt got to see her husband, and thank you. And like that stuff. It's the good juice. So thank you for telling me those things. So this has been like a process for me, and if you've been following me for a while, you already know that. The last couple months, though, have been kind of a twist or a turn that I didn't quite expect. Going down this road of like rights and laws and legal stuff, it's not really a path that I chose. It just kind of happened. And I'm thankful that it has, because it's really opened my eyes to so many things. But it wasn't ever anything that I was interested in. And I know that a lot of the stuff that I talk about and write about, especially when it comes to rights, seems kind of unconventional, and a lot of you may not agree with me, but I appreciate those people that challenge me on things, because it does force me to think through it a little more. But what I can tell you is that the stuff that I'm learning and the little journey that I've been on in the last few months, out of necessity, it's proving to me that this stuff works. Like the stuff that I'm learning and I'm applying, it works. And when the proof is in the pudding, like I'm going to keep on going. And I'm hoping that I can express to you why it is that I'm doing the things that I'm doing, and help you to understand the importance of it, especially in the situation that we're in right now. And the only way I can do that is by sharing my experiences and maybe kind of telling you a little story. But first, just a quick rundown of the few things that have happened over the last couple months that have put me in this spot and on this path. My uncle went through a landlord-tenant dispute in the court system, and it was horrific. I helped him. Once I heard the way the situation was going, I offered to help, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but it ended up being a pretty significant experience for me, because I saw firsthand how dysfunctional our system was. I reached out to a friend of mine in Pennsylvania who is a bit of he knows the law. He's not a lawyer, but he knows the law, and he himself is a landlord, so he was able to give me some advice. It's nothing, it wasn't, brain surgery. It was relatively easy stuff, but he knows the system and he knows how it works. And he gave me a few pieces of advice, and, he made sure I understood it. And I, in return, explained it to my uncle, and we worked together to do the things that my friend told me to do. And within a couple of weeks, we had a trial, and a few weeks later, the tenant was evicted. And based on what I understand, having talked to a lot of other people, it's a pretty impossible thing to do right now, is to get someone evicted in the middle of a pandemic. But we did it. So the stuff that I learned, the things that my friend shared with me, they worked. And, check, there's a little proof in the pudding for me. So I kept going. A few weeks later, I get a letter from the New Jersey Division of Taxation saying that they are going to charge me a shared responsibility payment for not having health insurance for all of last year. Mind you, I didn't use any health-related services last year, but yet they're still going to charge me somewhere between $1,200 and $1,800 for not having insurance. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. Why are you going to charge me a penalty because I haven't used the system, and because I don't have insurance, because I don't want to be a part of it, because I've worked inside of it and I know what it is? That's another tangent. But anyway, it just didn't make sense to me. So again, I reached out to my friend in Pennsylvania, and he said, look, do a little research here and here and, send over this kind of affidavit and see what happens. So sure enough, I did a little bit of research. I looked into some of the laws and the statutes, and I filled out an affidavit and I sent it off to the New Jersey Division of Taxation. And like 7 days later, I have something in the mail that's saying, basically you are not responsible for the shared savings payment. So again, I learned a little bit, I applied it, and it worked. So check, another, piece of proof in the pudding that this stuff does work. Even though from the beginning I was a little bit skeptical, and I thought, wow, this is pretty unconventional. The letter that I got said, "Dear taxpayer," and one of the first things I did in the letter I sent back was say, like, I'm not a taxpayer, I'm a woman. Like, whoever said I was a taxpayer? I may choose to pay taxes at some time, but that's not who I am. That's not my title. That's not my role. I'm a woman. So anyhow, that situation worked out. And then in these last 4 weeks of dealing with advocacy stuff, the healthcare system is something that I know, and I've been able to help people based on the things that I know and what I've been learning about rights. I've just been kind of putting those two things together and giving people information and helping them to understand their rights so that they can get in to see their grandmothers in nursing homes, their wives having babies, their husband that is in hospice care and, in his last days, wives being able to get in there and be at the bedside of their husband as he passes on. All these things are so important to me. And because I know a little bit about the inside of that system, I'm able to help people understand their rights when it comes to those things and make sure that they're able to claim those rights and make things happen. So again, proof in the pudding there. And what just keeps coming up for me is understanding what our rights are, knowing where they come from, knowing how to claim them, and knowing that through to your core. And when I say that this is, it's not just about writing some words on a paper and sending them off and hoping that, it all works out. When I say this is spiritual, I mean, in a sense that it's about knowing who you are to your core and, not letting anybody shake that. So when I hear that a mom just had a baby, and this literally happened over the weekend, a mom had a baby at a local hospital and she's not allowed to see the baby. And from what I'm hearing, they're doing certain things to the baby that she has not consented to, certain tests and certain things that the mom has not given any consent for them to do these things to her child. And they're also keeping them apart. And that just doesn't sit well with me, and it shouldn't sit well with anybody for any reason. So knowing your rights, knowing where they come from, and knowing how to claim them is so, so important, especially now. So the reason I think we've lost track of that stuff, over the generations is because it's been taken out of schools. Civics is no longer taught. It's not something we talk about at home. The media doesn't necessarily explain this stuff to us. So we're all kind of just happy-go-lucky. We haven't really been forced to know what our rights are because they haven't really been challenged up until the last year. So we've kind of forgotten, and we've been reprogrammed in a sense to forget on purpose, I think. But what I've had to do over the last, 6 months or so is to reprogram myself to get back to a place where I know I have rights and I know where they come from, and I'm learning how to claim them. So in order for me to explain this, I'm going to take you on a little adventure. Let's imagine that me and you are lost at sea. We're in separate boats and we're just floating around in the ocean, right? And by the grace of God or whatever divine intervention, we both end up on this deserted island. It's a tropical deserted island. There's palm trees and stuff. So anyway, we end up on this island. we get out of our boats, we come face to face, and there we are, me and you, a woman and a man, or a woman. And do you have more rights than me at that moment right there on that island? Do I have more rights than you? And I'm hoping you're saying no, because we're the same. Like, this is baseline. There is nothing around us. It's just me and you. And right there at that moment, we have the same amount of rights to live and to breathe and to, you know, by the virtue of the fact that we are alive, we have rights. So, you know, you may be stronger than me or smarter than me. I might be able to catch more fish than you. But that doesn't impact the rights that we have. You know, you can force me to do things, but that isn't really humane. You know, that's slavery, forcing someone to do something against their will. It doesn't fly. You know, as compassionate beings, we know that that's not the way to go about things. You know, we can contract, we can have a discussion and decide, listen, you know, if you build a shelter, I'll go catch the fish. And if you share your shelter with me, I'll share my fish with you. And, you know, okay, we have a contract, we have an agreement. We're both going to equally share in these things so that we can live, you know, peacefully and survive through this episode of being trapped on a deserted island. Or there's kind of a third option where, you know what, I just sit back and let you make all the decisions passively. You know what, you can kind of do whatever you want and I'll just go with the flow. I'm tacitly agreeing to whatever it is that you're going to do. But then I'm completely dependent on you. And if you decide not to go fishing, you know, am I going to starve, or am I going to go figure out how to fish myself? So there's kind of three ways to look at those things. But at the end of the day, we still have an equal amount of rights. Now, if a plane were to land and to scoop us up and bring us to this landmass known as the United States, when we land on this continent, do we get any more rights, or do we lose any rights? Like, did something happen in, you know, from our little deserted island to the United States? Did anything happen to give us more rights along the way, or take away rights? I would say no. And I would say that everyone else on this landmass known as the United States has an equal amount of rights as we do. Nobody is born, you know, with more rights or less rights. You know, the president wasn't born with some silver spoon in his mouth that says he has more rights. He just happens to have a title of president that gives him a bit more power, you know, to do certain things. But what we have to understand is the power that he's given comes through, you know, the document called the Constitution. The document called the Constitution was created by men and women. So if men and women are supreme and we're up here because we're here by the grace of God or the creator or whoever, you know, we've all got equal rights, and they're all about as strong a rights as you can have. You know, we create the Constitution, and the Constitution creates the role of president. So hopefully you can see kind of that hierarchy, that flow. But above it all, it's men and women, me and you, with equal amount of rights. So when one of these women goes into the hospital and has a baby, you know, is she giving away her rights? You know, her rights to her property, her child? Is she giving away rights to her body? No. When a son or daughter decides to, when you decide to sign your kid up for school, like, are you giving away rights that you know, son or daughter has just because you want to send them to school? No. And I think this is where a lot of people get confused, because they're saying, like, oh, but I am this role of teacher or student or, you know, police officer or customer, whatever it is. Just because you've accepted that role doesn't mean you've given up your rights as a man or a woman. There is no person, there is no other man or woman that has more rights than you, that can say that you have to do certain things. So when it comes down to those moments where, you know, things need to be forced, then there's a process to go through. And it's due process. It's happens in a system outside of the government. The courts essentially sit outside of the government, and they decide a lot of these matters when things need to be forced. So if someone is going to be quarantined, it's done based on a court order. If someone is going to be forced to have a test, it's done based on a court order. That's the lawful way of doing things. Now, we can choose to do those things. You know, we can be that passive person and just go along with it. We can be forced to do it, but that would basically make us a slave. Or we can have a contract to do it. So when somebody offers us a contract, someone offers us a medical intervention as a contract, you know, we have the right to refuse it. We have the right to say, listen, I'm only going to take this if you tell me all the details. And if they can't tell you all the details, then it's not a clear contract. And in that instance, you would probably want to refuse it. So let me just share something with you quick, because I think it will help to explain this a little better. So this is the travel restrictions for New Jersey. And what I want to point out to you is right here. The self-quarantine is voluntary, but compliance is expected, right? The self-quarantine is voluntary. That's because they cannot force you to quarantine if you know that you are a man or a woman, and the only way that they can force you to do something is by way of a court order. Just like they can't force mama to, you know, turn over her baby, which is her property, you know, for certain types of testing and that sort of thing. The other thing I wanted to share with you, and let me just make sure we're sharing the right one, is, okay, here we go, the right one. So this is the Emergency Health Powers Act of New Jersey. Let me just make sure I have that right. Also known as, yep, Emergency Health Powers Act. So if we go down here to right here, 2613-14, powers of a commissioner during a public health emergency. I just want to skip down. A says require the vaccination of persons as protection against infectious disease, so on and so forth. Vaccination may be performed by any authorized personnel. No vaccine shall be administered without obtaining the informed consent of the person to be vaccinated. That's the law. That's the law that the governor cites in his executive orders, saying that we have to wear masks and we have to, you know, do all this stuff. So basically we see right there that you can't vaccinate someone without consent. So I don't mean to belabor this. Let me just show you one more thing to kind of put a fine point on it. Again, whatever this power is that created us, man, woman, people, we are supreme, you know, in line after our creator. We create the Constitution creates the federal government, the president, all that other stuff. Everything else under here just falls in line. But knowing who you are as a man, as a woman, as a people, supersedes all this other stuff. And once you know that to your core, a lot of these vaccination mandates and these mask mandates and these hospitals keeping mamas from babies, that'll all fall away. And that's the stuff that I want to be talking to you about in the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to be putting together some Zoom meetings to drill down deeper into some of the stuff. And I hope that if you're interested, you'll send me a note and we can, I'll put you on a list so I can make sure you get those invites. As I mentioned, this is like a spiritual process. It's not like, here's a stack of papers, go send them off in the mail. You know, this is also by no ways or means any type of legal advice. I'm not suggesting that the next time you get pulled over, you tell the cop that you're a man or a woman, and you know, that's not going to work either. Like I said, it's a process. You have to understand it. but knowing at your core that we all have the same amount of rights and no one can just come in and force things upon you, force things upon your child, you know, take away certain things that are just inherent and God given. That stuff can't happen unless we let it happen. So please know this stuff to your core. And if you have any questions or if you want to challenge me on things, like send it my way. You guys know I'm open to all that stuff and I welcome it. And clearly it's getting a little bit dark and I got to go put the chickens in. So I'm going to shut up for now. But thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.